Hi, I'm Moshier-McDivitt. I'm a Capacity Building Associate with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. This video series is going to focus on some questions that we get regarding retooling transitional housing. When we've been out in communities talking about options for retooling transitional housing, we find that there's a number of questions that are common to a lot of communities that often come up. So what we want to do with this video is answer some of those questions. One of the questions we often get is, why should our community or program consider retooling our transitional housing program? And that's a really big question. Why retool? I want to start out by saying that we know that there's a lot of transitional housing providers that have been doing this work for a long time. They have a lot of great resources in their programs. But we continue to keep learning about effective practices in terms of ending homelessness, particularly for families and for individuals. And we've really started looking a lot at transitional housing programs because we've seen communities that have taken a look at the different types of strategies that they use in their community and have been assessing how do we take all these strategies and make sure we're using our resources in the best way possible. We've learned a lot and we continue to learn. And so as we continue to learn about new strategies and what's working in communities, it's always important to take time to really assess our program and how our program is contributing to our community goals in preventing and ending homelessness. We learned a lot through HPRP. HPRP was this big influx of resources that came into our communities and helped us look at prevention. A lot of communities really looked at targeted prevention, and they were able to prevent homelessness for folks who maybe would come into the system and need transitional housing resources. But even bigger, communities that really used a lot of resources to rapid rehousing really found that the need for transitional housing changed. I know I talked with one program that retooled to a rapid rehousing model, and when I asked them what made them decide to do that, they talked about how they had originally been working with particular types of families, and through HPRP's rapid rehousing resources, all of those families were being rapidly rehoused. And so when it came to the eligibility to come into the transitional housing program, there weren't that many people that needed their program anymore. And that was a real aha moment for them. We're learning new stuff. We now have rapid rehousing, so how can we start using our program and our rich resources in a way that can really further this new model of rapid rehousing? And that was their decision and their reasons for retooling. Another thing that we really encourage communities to look at in programs is the Hearth objectives and the federal plan, the Opening Doors strategic plan to end homelessness. And when you look at what both of those what the objectives put forth with Hearth and the Opening Doors plans, it really talks about quickly rehousing people. Transitional housing is normally a long-term program. People often stay in transitional housing programs for a year, as much as 2 years. So when we look at the Hearth objectives, some of the key objectives are that we need to be reducing homelessness, we need to be reducing first-time homelessness, and one of the most significant things that transitional housing programs can start thinking about is how do they contribute to reducing the length of stay of homelessness. Often folks will come into transitional housing from an emergency shelter. So already they've had to stay in emergency shelter, and then they come into transitional housing. And if it's a long-term length of stay, in some ways it just keeps lengthening that stay. And if we want to start looking at reducing it, how do we start thinking about making our program either a shorter length of stay program or moving to a rapid rehousing, a rapid exit approach within our program? And so really start thinking, does our program contribute to the overall performance objectives of the Hearth Act? What about our community's objectives to prevent and end homelessness? So ultimately, it really is about preventing and ending homelessness. It's a great opportunity to look at your program and strategically think about, how does our program in today's world line up with what we know about best practices? How are we contributing to the success of preventing and ending homelessness in our community? How are we contributing to the success of shortening the length of stay in our community? And what steps can we start taking to make sure that we're really helping our community move forward in preventing and ending homelessness? I'm Moshier-McDivitt, and we're talking about retooling transitional housing.